George Washington, chosen a delegate from Virginia to this Congress, left Virginia in May expecting to be home by the end of June because he had a lot of things to attend to back on his farm. And Washington was a very busy man and a very good businessman and farmer, but he would work in service to this cause. So he did go to Philadelphia expecting that he would be back by July. He'll be back in 1783, actually. And he arrived in Philadelphia. Actually, John Adams wrote in his diary one day during this session of Congress, Colonel Washington appears in his uniform. And from that one line, you'll see historians making all kinds of grand claims that Washington wore his uniform every day, that he didn't appear in anything else. And then we have to interpret what exactly he meant by this. I think it's quite astonishing that he fit into this uniform after all of this years of being a civilian farmer. Washington immediately was put on the committees Congress created to look into defenses of New York and how to organize an army, and seemed to be the one member of Congress who understood how a military should operate or should be organized. And Congress, in the wake of Lexington and Concord, the British march out to seize these weapons, and the militia is roused in Lexington and Concord and other towns, and by the end of the day, the British are back in Boston and Charlestown, and now there are 20,000 militia troops surrounding them in Cambridge and Roxbury, preventing General Gage and his men from getting provisions, from getting firewood or livestock or grain or anything else they would need to survive in the town of Boston. This is something they hadn't expected. And also no one in Congress had expected what to do or knew what to do with 20,000 militia troops surrounding Boston. So Congress debated, actually John Adams proposed having Congress adopt them as a continental army. And as Congress was beginning to think along this line that maybe they should be a continental army, and they said, okay, we'll begin the debate today, and after we've agreed on how to organize it, we'll figure out how exactly it should be administered, who should run it. And Adams says, maybe we should start thinking about the officer who should be in charge. And he said, I have in mind someone who is known throughout the colonies, someone who already has a military reputation, someone who has a private fortune he has already committed to the cause. And Adams realized as he was speaking, out of one eye he could see, presiding over the Congress, John Hancock, commander of the Corps of Cadets, that is one of the leading military officials in Massachusetts, a man who was known throughout the colonies, one of the wealthiest men in the provinces. I mean, he did have a private fortune, and he had committed it to this cause, and Hancock imagined that Adams was talking about him. And he began sitting up. Is anyone a Hancock here, by the way? Sitting up in his chair, and then Adams saw out of his other eye Washington sitting by the door. And Washington also got the sense Adams was talking about him. He didn't respond the way Hancock did. He got up and went through the door and left the room. And then Adams said, the person I have in mind is Colonel George Washington of Virginia. And Hancock glowered at him and never really forgave him for this, as Adams later said. And Washington realized he was nominated and said, you may count on it. From this day, I count the end of my reputation. He realized that this would not be an easy thing. Now, Washington sets off, and actually Washington also agreed he would serve, but only without a salary. Now, Congress appointed other generals, most notably Charles Lee, and they were happy to get Charles Lee because he was a real general. He was a British general. He had served in Europe, and Lee was a retired British general living in the American colonies. Washington insisted he serve without a salary. Lee was actually giving up his pension from the British Army in order to serve this cause, so he wanted to be compensated. So it actually took about 2 weeks to negotiate Charles Lee's contract to serve as the second in command. Are there any Lee descendants here? Well, an interesting individual.